Rotary Club of Tulsa's president for this Rotary year. Today, we honor our veterans, worthy men and women who called upon to serve our country and protect. We thank them for their unselfish service, for their hardships they faced, for the sacrifices they made to preserve our freedoms, our safety, and our country's heritage for all of us. May we never forget. Now, without further ado, I want to turn the program over to our Rotarian of the Day, past President Matt Davis. Matt?
Thank you. We are so honored today to have our wonderful United States Senator, who happens to also be my mom's beloved little brother, a fabulous husband, father, and grandfather, to speak to us. And I would like to introduce you all to someone who doesn't need an introduction, Senator Jim Inhofe.
Hey, Matt, that's great. Now, there's someone on this screen who looks exactly like your brother. Could that be Fred Davis? I think it is.
And it's an early hour for him.
Well, I guess it is out in California. Well, anyway, this is I got to tell you, I know a lot of media is going to be in on this deal, and they have to understand what happened a week ago today and how wrong I was. I was absolutely convinced. I had no doubt in my mind. It was a laydown. We were going to maintain the majority, maybe even pick up the United States House. And we were going to have, no question, another 4 years of the president who's now in the White House. And I had that all the way, in fact, all the way until late in the night, a week ago today, I believed that. And we had everybody there. I had all my family there, and Freddie, you weren't, yeah, you were there. And we had a chance to really celebrate, not knowing that what we were celebrating wasn't really happening, and that the president's race was not coming through the way it was supposed to. I want to talk a little bit about that, but I know this is about veterans. So let me share a few thoughts about what is happening now, since we are celebrating our veterans today. And I've always enjoyed doing this. In fact, I've talked to your club before on Veterans Day, because for a number of years, I was the only veteran on our Oklahoma delegation. And so I had quite a few of the requests. But I'd like to mention, we went through a bad spell not too long ago. It was a USA Today article in 2015. And they came out talking about how poorly we're treating veterans in the state of Oklahoma. This was this is USA Today. Everybody was watching this. It was, you know, I really wasn't aware that it was as bad as it was. Now, we found out at that time that we couldn't correct the problem. We diagnosed the problem real quick. We found we had two bad actors there that were running this thing, and yet we couldn't fire them. And we actually had to pass laws to be able to fire these individuals that were responsible for making us 47th in the nation in terms of of how we're treating veterans. A very bad thing. We actually had to introduce and pass legislation to make this happen. There are 3 bills to make it a reality. I authored 2 of those bills. The first one was to give additional firing authority so that we could fire people. We had someone, a Dr. Stephen Greer from Muskogee, that we tried to fire, and he later on pleaded guilty to tampering with a witness, a patient with whom he had had intimate relations, and we couldn't fire him. You know, because we had to pass a law to allow us to be able to do that. The second thing we did was the Enhanced Veteran Care Act, which also was allowed outside investigators to come in. I don't think many of you in the room and the audience today realize that we didn't have that ability to have to investigate, have an outside investigator come in. So we passed a law so we could do that, and we had the investigators come in. And then the third one was the Veterans Choice that gave the opportunities to veterans that we didn't have before. Now, we've come a long way since then. And we're now, I mentioned that we dropped down to 47th in the nation. We're now 9th in the nation. So we can celebrate today, you guys. The good things have happened. We right now have a new Tulsa VA hospital that will bring growth in veterans care to both Muskogee and to Tulsa. You know, we took over a lot of the responsibilities from Muskogee, but Muskogee is still heading up an increase in behavioral science activity there, and they actually will be just as busy as they've been before. But we're going to have a very modern 58-bed hospital for our veterans. We have great things that are happening, and so it's a happy ending on that, and I want to share that with everyone. And I know that we're limited in time, and I want to be sure I cover the things that are required. One of them is, and every veteran out there who is concerned with how we're treating veterans, not just in Oklahoma and not just in Tulsa, but in throughout the nation, are concerned just as much about what has happened to the military. When Barack Obama was first elected, he made and I have to say, and I will say this in a flattering sense, it sounds like I'm criticizing him for the way he was considering the military and what had happened to the military, but that wasn't his priority. And he was honest about it. You know, I don't mind people that it's the hypocrites I don't like around here, the ones that act one way and are not performing. Well, he had no interest, not much interest in the military, but he had his agenda. You remember what Obama's agenda was? So in the last 5 years, the last 5 years of his term would have been 2010 through 2015. During that time, he reduced the funding of the military by 25%. Now you stop and think about that, reducing the military by 25%. At the same time he was doing that, China was increasing their military by 83%. Russia was doing the same thing. It was up 34%. And so what happened during that time frame was we fell behind. We had our artillery. We were being outnumbered by 10 to 1 in Russia and 5 to 1 in China. We had a thing that is called the hypersonics. That's a state of the art where we are in modernizing our military. And we were actually behind both China and Russia at that time. So we got a president in here, and I have to say that a lot of it is due to Jeff Sessions. You remember Jeff Sessions was the only Republican who supported Donald Trump early in his campaign. And consequently, he became very close to him. And later on, Trump fired him. That was one of the 2 firings that I didn't agree with. And nonetheless, he was one of my best friends. And so he kind of made it clear to the president that I was the one who knew what we had to do to the military to put us back to number 1. And we're not there yet, but we're on the road to being there. So I became very close to the president. And we started changing these things and putting ourselves in a position where we were going to be able to rebuild our military. Now, not many people, of the 100 or so people who are watching from me right now, I would say that not many of them were aware, and some don't even believe it today, where we were relative to our adversaries. And those primary adversaries, of course, are China and Russia. So this is something that is way below my comfort level. And we decided we're going to do what was necessary to bring us back up. And we did. And we started increasing what we're doing in our activity. And all these things were going on. And the reason I'm going into detail on this now is because we have a serious problem. We don't know for sure how this election is going to turn out. So, but I'm going to say this. I've kind of talked about the bad news of what could happen if we have a change in administration, and everyone's assuming particularly after the last weekend, that there's going to be a change. And I'll address that in just a minute. But in the meantime, I chair, and I think everyone knows that, and this won't be changed. I chair the Senate Armed Services Committee. So the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, we're in the process of passing that now. In fact, in 1 hour from now, the big four are going to meet. That's the leaders of the House and the Senate to start working on our NDAA and it has to be completed by the end of December. So that's happening here at the same time. So those ingredients that I put in since we had the opportunity to do this that affect Oklahoma, I'm going to share those with you. And I'd hope that any press that is watching right now can appreciate the fact that we have a bill that is going to pass. It will pass with these provisions in it that I put in during this process. First of all, we put $2.8 billion in the KC-46 program. The KC-135 has been around for 60 years. In fact, during the last administration, we had the opportunity to talk. One of the few persons that I really liked in the previous administration was the Secretary of the Air Force, and she and I worked on this KC-46 program for a long time, and then we announced it in Altus, Oklahoma, that we're going to replace the KC-135. That's the refueling vehicle that we have with the KC-46. And so my comments were 60 years ago, two wonderful things happened. Number one, my wife, Kay, and I got married. And number two, the first KC-135 went into Altus Air Force Base to take care of those problems. And so that was a wonderful thing. I want to make sure that the replacement of that is going to be the KC-46 that is going to be married to us here in Oklahoma. It's going to be used for training at Altus. It's going to be used, maintenance will take place in Tinker. I'm talking about these things. They're already in this bill we're going to pass. We're going to pass this bill while this administration is still in, and this administration may still be in. We don't know how that's going to turn out. Second thing is we put $2.8 billion in the B-21. The B-21, right now, our strategic bombers are the B-1, the B-2, and the B-52. And this will replace and will update that and keep us up with the competition. And that's going to be, again, that will be used and will be maintained at Tinker Air Force Base. The third thing that we put in here is in the area of artillery. At Altus, at Fort Sill, down in Elgin is where all this is taking place in Oklahoma. We have a PIM program. Now I wish there were time, I'd love to tell you the story about what happened and how our own President Bush was responsible for killing a PIM program that would have been really a great program, but it did die. And so we started working on setting up another artillery program and to make sure that we don't fade away from this one. You've got to keep in mind, we actually spent billions of dollars on artillery programs before, and then we ended up losing it. So this one, we went ahead and have purchased 30 sets of this PIM program, which is it's an upgraded self-propelled howitzer. And that's something that will be the state of the art, and it'll be all right there in Oklahoma, assembled in Oklahoma. We're also going to do the T-7. As you know, up in Vance Air Force Base, we train the pilots, the young pilots. We're training them now in the old T-38s that have been around for a long period of time. And we are now embarking on the T-7, and that's going to take place in Altus, Oklahoma. And then if you were to talk to your friends there about the 5 major military installations that we have in Oklahoma, the one they probably wouldn't know about is McAllister, because McAllister only has one uniformed officer, and that's the general who's in charge of it. But it's the one that does all the explosive things. And of course, that is now, and we put a new ammo demolition shop in there to make sure that nobody takes that away from us. So we will maintain that capability. And all kinds of other things are in there that are helpful. We have provisions in there for Oklahoma University, Oklahoma State University, and Tulsa University to have them working on unmanned vehicles and cyber security. So we are doing a good job with that. It's and those things are going to be in regardless of what happens. So here we are with the goof that I made a week ago today. I had every expectation that President Trump would be reelected, and for the right reasons. And I think all of you heard me say over and over again, I don't have any doubt, but he's going to be reelected because of the things that he has done. This is something I want to show you. You can't see it very well, but you can go to my website. This is a thing I put together early in the Trump administration, talking about his accomplishments. And I think it's important now that you look and realize this is true today. Now, it may not be true. We don't know for sure what's going to happen in this election. I think probably the Democrats were smart in doing what they did. They're going to get so far out in that branch that everyone's going to assume it's already a done deal when it's not a done deal, which I'll mention in just a minute. But before that, I want you to know, and it's important, these things you can get. What's my website I want to use on that? inhofe.senate.gov. Yeah, look up inhofe.senate.gov and just pull this up. This is a card. This is the 10 things that the president has done that most people are not even aware of, and why it's so important that he do everything he can to try to stay in that position. First of all, the biggest tax cuts that we've had historically in this country. We know, and by the way, the tax cuts that our president did, that was not a Republican program. That was the Democrat program. That's what John Kennedy established back for a different reason. But back in his administration, he said, in order to fund the new programs and the new social programs, we've got to have new revenue or revenue. And the best way to increase revenue is to decrease marginal rates. And he did it, and it worked. Unfortunately, John Kennedy died before he could reap the benefits of what he had established. But then presidents after that, Democrat and Republican presidents, looked and said, hey, that's a way of doing it. We need to reduce the tax rates, and every time they do it, it would increase the revenue that comes in. So that actually happened. But what this president did in addition to that, and this is the second thing I want to mention to you, he reduced also the regulations. And that's why up until the pandemic set in, we had the best economy we've had in my lifetime. They say that full employment is 4% unemployment. Well, we actually got down below 3%. That's never happened before. And that's where we were when the pandemic set in. And unfortunately, the Democrats were successful in blaming our president. And I'm sure that probably made the difference in what perceived to be a real tight race that probably would not have been otherwise. But we went ahead and we did this with the regulation relief. And some of you, a bunch of you who are watching right now have called me during the years that Barbara Boxer and I actually chaired the committee called Environment and Public Works Committee. That's where most of the regulations came in. And I say that so that this is a little bit of history. When the Democrats were a majority in the House, in Congress, then Barbara Boxer would have been chairman. I'd be ranking member of that committee. When Republicans were a majority, I'd be chairman and she'd be ranking member. But we worked together so well. And I mean, this surprises a lot of people that we did. I remember that every Tuesday we'd have a meeting with Mitch McConnell of all the chairmen. And when it came my turn, I'd say, now from the committee that actually gets things done, we did all the highway bills, the chemical bills, the water Resources Development Act. We did, and it was all very successful. And we did it just by working together. Now, how does this work? You have someone, every time they mention who are the three most conservative and the three most liberal members of the United States Senate, she was always on the three most liberal. I was always on the three most conservative. But we actually got things done. Do we have access to that, Bernie Sanders?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you guys now watch this, because this was on CNN with Bernie Sanders was on, and this is taken from that, if we can figure it out.
There you go. If we could get screen sharing permission, Tina, by chance. There we go.
You got it?
Yes, sir.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Now listen carefully. Turn it up a little.
Washington works well when people in Washington from both sides of the aisle know each other, work well together. Who is the person that is closest to you with whom you disagree the most on politics?
Republican, we're talking about. Well, you see, the irony here, and this is not even funny. If I told you the Republican that I liked the most, it'd probably ruin his political career.
Do it. Do it.
There'll be a 30-second ad. Sanders said he likes this person. Nice finish. All right. I'll give you an example. One of the most conservative members of the Senate is a fellow named Jim Inhofe from Oklahoma. And Jim is a climate change denier. He is really, really conservative. But you know what? He is a decent guy, and I like him. And he and I are friends. And you find that. You find
that's enough of that.
Just because you have very significant.
All right, are we back on the screen?
Yeah.
See, I wouldn't have shown this before the election. So nonetheless, there's a lot of truth to this. In fact, I'll tell you how that relationship took place. I can remember when Bernie Sanders was first elected. If you remember, they had the House and the Senate and the White House. And so I got a call from my chief of staff, not the one who's with me right now, but Herb Johnson called me up and said, you better get down to the floor right now because, you know, the Democrats have everything and you have Bernie Sanders down there and he's passing a bill to put oil and gas out of business permanently. And it's going to be signed by the president if he gets it passed. So I went down there. No one else was down there except Bernie Sanders. And we engaged in a debate. And it was a long debate. And when it was over, we voted and I won and he lost. And this is the statement that Bernie Sanders said on the floor. He said, you know, this is what the Senate should be doing. We should be debating these things. And it happens we debated this and Inhofe won and I lost. He's from an oil state. He knew the subject a little bit better, but that's what we should be doing. I went over to thank him because he was saying that live on TV and he and I have been good friends. It's the people that you can disagree with, but you can have a lot of respect for, and he's one that I do. So anyway, I wanted to mention that, and what I want you to do is each one of you to go to my website and pull this card up, and you can have it. I mentioned the first two things he did. The third thing that is very significant that we should all in this room be concerned with is energy. I mean, we went through 8 years of Obama, who had a war on fossil fuels, that's coal, oil, and gas. And he was doing everything he could to destroy coal, oil, and gas. And now with the president we have in there right now, all that changed and we became the energy capital. I mean, we increased our growth in crude exports by 277%. So a lot of what contributed to the great things that we've done in this administration in terms of the economy. He cracked down on the illegal immigration on the wall. Every president that I can remember now, and Democrats and Republicans all said that they wanted to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. They never did it. This president just went ahead and did it. Did things that other people didn't do. He enacted the infrastructure bills, the WRDA bill, the FAA reauthorization bill, the judges. I mean, you stop and think about it. Is when a president goes in and then you have a lot of legislations passed, that's important, yeah, but not as important as the president appointing, nominating judges and getting them confirmed. Right now, this president has 3 conservative United States Supreme Court justices that have been confirmed. Nobody ever dreamed that would happen in one administration, but it did. But what you may not be aware of is that we now, by the end of this week, we will have 222 new judges that have been appointed. All due, have to give credit to Harry Reid. Remember Harry Reid, who is a Democrat, was a good friend of mine, but he's a Democrat that ran the Senate. He was the one who took it away so that you wouldn't, he called it the nuclear option, allowing us to do it with a simple majority instead to confirm judges instead of having to have a super majority. So none of that would have been possible. So those of you, you got a lot of liberals in your club, I understand that, but those who are conservatives, you ought to be rejoicing right now, because regardless of what happens, we're going to have 222 conservative judges that are actually going to have read the Constitution. That's a kind of a refreshing thing that has happened. And then anyone there in business know what Dodd-Franks did. He did away with Dodd-Franks and all that. But the one thing I want to zero in on, and this is the one that concerns me the most, and that is what we have successfully been able to do in this administration for the military, rebuilding the military. I mentioned that in the last 5 years of the Obama administration, he actually reduced our military by 25%. And that's just unheard of. Now, some people, I know we have 100 or so people. There are some who probably agree with that we spend too much on military. It's not true at all. Every time, if anyone, those of you who are hawks and want to build a strong national defense, need to keep in mind when they come up to you and say, we spend more in the United States than China and Russia spend on military put together. Yeah, that's true. But the single most expensive thing that we have is personnel, and all the things about housing for our families and the kids, make sure that the troops have schools for the kids to go to. In China and in Russia, they don't do that. Communist countries don't do that. They just give them a gun and say, go out and kill people. Now, what I've done, I've kept my word with my nephew, Matt, and I've covered the things that are supposed to be covered, with one exception, and that is where the president is right now. There's a lot of discussion going on, and I'm going to give you where the president is currently. I talked to him yesterday at length. What he has done, he's gone through and looked at those areas where the margin was under 1%, in most cases under 0.5%, and attempted to show where there was fraud and abuse in some of these states. And we just give you the bottom line here. Pennsylvania and Georgia are states where that could very well have happened. However, if the president were successful in getting those to make their change, that would only change to 268, and of course the president would have to have 270. That would be too short of the 270, and the opportunities would be to get those the 2 points that would either have to come from Arizona, Nevada, or Wisconsin. And I say that because the president is very sincere about this, and it's not over, but that's where we are today. And what's going to happen? The important thing that is going to happen is, are we going to maintain the Republican majority in the United States Senate? And for those of you who really want to do what we've been trying to do and have been successful in doing in rebuilding our military, it's imperative that that happens. That's going to take place on January 5th in Georgia. In Georgia, there are 2 races that will take place at that time. The 2 races, I think, it would appear should be races that would be won by 2 of the incumbents, Loeffler and who's that?
David.
Perdue. Yeah, Perdue. Yeah, Fred is at the helm of. And that's assuming that Biden pulls this thing off, and I would no longer be in the majority and would be losing a lot of the capacity and things that we have been doing. Fortunately, all the things I mentioned that are in this current bill, the largest bill every year passed, are the things I mentioned for Oklahoma, and they're already in there. But that's where we are right now, and that's what's going to happen on January the 5th. Now, I told Matt that I would go right up to this time. I'm exactly on schedule where I'm supposed to be, and if there's to open it up for any questions should be asked.
Okay, and I'm fielding questions for you. The first question I have is,
how many people have their own nephew fielding questions for them?
Why do we need to keep increasing our defense spending? Don't Russia and China spend less than us?
I just answered that. You weren't listening.
I heard you, but I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate on that.
No, I don't. Yeah, I'm kidding you. I'm giving you a hard time. I understand that. No, there's nothing really to elaborate on that because it's the cost of personnel. That's and this is America. This isn't China. This isn't Russia. And so I would say that that's something that the question came in before I made that comment. But no, that's under control.
Okay, great. How about you mentioned that Jeff Sessions firing you weren't in agreement with, and one other firing. Who was the other one?
John, what's John's last name? John Bolton. John Bolton, a lot of you know who John Bolton is. I've known him forever. He was the ambassador in a previous Republican administration, ambassador to the United Nations, a real brilliant guy. And he was one of the strongest supporters of Trump. And those are my two favorite people. And he fired both of them. Now, he does have well, I can't. I don't know how to describe this, but when he decides he didn't have someone's love and passion and all that, he fires him, and so that happened. It shouldn't have happened to either one of them, but so there, I'm on record there criticizing my president for doing that.
Okay.
But and he was really good too. John Bolton. Remember, probably half of you guys in there and gals know who John Bolton is and what a hero he's been in the past, but they didn't get along. They had an argument. The same thing happened with Jeff Sessions. I reminded the president, I said, look, Jeff Sessions was there when and myself included, not one Republican was supporting you when you first got in this race. Well, he shouldn't have. Well, anyway, that's behind us. I forgot what your question is, but that's
Martin with Fox 23 asked, what evidence is there supporting voter fraud?
Oh, well, we're not supposed to know that yet. I don't know that yet. And I'm not sure that the president knows that, but he has the investigation going on and he has a lot of reasons for believing that there is fraud. So I would say to anyone there from the press who has questions about that, you just have to wait just a short period of time until he comes out and says what, as I mentioned, what fraud is out there. Would that have impacted 3 states in such a way that should not have lost the election? Now, if that happens, you'll hear about it. But I can't answer the question now, nor can, I think the president probably could, because he's been studying some of the fraud, alleged fraud, and let's wait and see what happens.
Okay, past President Ed Monette asked, you just won by a 2-to-1 margin despite an aggressive opponent. Why do you think that was?
Well, the opponent was aggressive and had a lot of money to spend, and you got to keep in mind that she was, I think, mistakenly let her philosophy be known when she said that she was. And I carry this card with me just in case someone asks questions like that. Elizabeth Warren is the most liberal member of the United States Senate. Now, some people may argue that one or other, maybe Bernie or some of the others, but by the criteria that we use, she's the most liberal. She is for the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, abortion on demand, gun control, amnesty for illegals, gutting the military and all that. Well, she was my opponent was the only one she was supporting. Obviously, she's not going to support someone, and it's someone who shares her philosophy. In fact, my opponent actually said, we share some of the same value. Well, maybe we share the same values. Whatever it was, that tied her in so people realized that she was a very liberal individual. And she spent all of her time talking about how bad I was. There's something that's kind of it's getting into the weeds a little bit here, but you see it in any political science book, 101. The best way to run against an incumbent is to get the strongest points of the incumbent and attack those and turn those assets into liabilities. That's what she was attempting to do, and she was not capable of getting it done.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and that was, what happened to the fleet of KC-10 refuelers stationed at March Air Force Base? I don't know that base. MARCH?
No, I don't think. Okay, obviously I can't answer that question because I don't know what he's talking about. I say that respectfully. Yeah, do this for me, Matt. Give me his name. I will call him back within an hour and answer that question.
I'll do it. And
All
with
right.
that, I'll turn this back over to President Paul.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Senator Inhofe, for joining us today and for your service to our country. Congratulations on your recent election win. We appreciate all that you do in representing Oklahoma. So thank you again for joining us today.
Well, I want to say I always enjoy your crowd too. I enjoy making presentations there. And you have a diverse group. I mean, you have Democrats, Republicans, and I always enjoy being with you. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Special thanks to this week's sponsors, Spirit Bank, Rhonda Hayes and TC Blair, Gable Gottwalls, Jeff Hassel, John Dale, Paul Rossler, Greater Tulsa reporter, Forrest Cameron, Small Associates Financial, Chris McCune. Our next Zoom meeting will be next Wednesday, November 18th at 12 p.m. Our speaker will be Jim Stovall, so please join us for that meeting. And be sure to sign up now for bell ringing on December 3rd for the Salvation Army, and also Shop with a Cop on December 5th. The sign up links are in the Monday message that Tina sends out, so please check those out. Thank you for joining us today for our Coffee with the Crew meeting. Please remember to thank a veteran for their service this week. Have a great week. And with that, we're adjourned.